dear friend and inspiration, Mark Samuel. You're going to get to know him and meet him in a little bit. This is now being streamed live to Facebook. So Mark and I are privately online, and of course there's a little Althea moderator with us, and then everyone else is watching the stream. Now this will be automatically recorded, so unless Mark forbids us, we will then post it again later, because there's going to be such cool stuff that you're going to want to hear again and again and again, particularly after I stop talking. So, so welcome, Mark. Now, what we do in our Sunday gatherings is, we start off with some announcements and then a little centering, and then we're just going to get into it with you. So, is that okay for you?
That sounds great. Thank you for having me. I can't wait to hear all the announcements and the centering.
Well, we are a center. It's the Althea Center, so we do a lot of centering. All right, well, I'll make the announcements pretty quick. If you're online, then you can check out the links to our amazing Mariposa event. Immigration is an LGBTQ issue, Love Across Borders. It's a free 4-week series, and it's super cool. I am fortunate to have been just a tiny little bit behind the scenes with Tim as he was planning this. And it's a pretty shocking topic that will not only give you new insight into the LGBTQ community, but it really will open your eyes to thinking about immigration differently, and also thinking about our own lives, our own privileges and freedoms, and what we take for granted differently. It's cool stuff. Explorations on Thursdays is going to have a new format. So take a breath, get out your pen and paper, but there's going to be links for all this. It's a new time. The official time is 12:30 to 1:30. That's the community Zoom conversation. But at 12 o'clock, I will go live on YouTube, and I'm going to deliver a talk, a 15-minute talk on a topic that then at 12:30, we will come together virtually to discuss. Does that make sense? So you can attend both or just one of the two. It's up to you. And then this way, the talks are recorded and are available for people who just want the talk. And then the conversation is protected and private for the people who want to connect. Last couple of things, and then we're going to do the centering. Althea Women Emerging, our AW group, is having a virtual gathering Saturday, September 12th. That's coming right up. It's 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Zoom information will be available in the newsletter. That's Althea Women Emerging. And finally, we have a fundraising telethon, Mark. I just realized you should be part of this. It's a musical fundraiser. And we are going to have a variety of beloved members of our community, including Doug Fisichella, our old president, Rich and Linda Rittiger, Chris Webster, Richard Fletcher, Rick Stanton, and Gonzalo Tepa, Sandra Wong, John Souza, of course, Daryl Johnson, and all the way live recorded. We're going to have a crisp, clean, beautiful recording dedicated to us, the Amavivani group in South Africa. And Mark, what are you going to play at this event? Sounds like
Did you
drums.
hear that?
A little bit, or maybe you just have a nervous twitch. I just saw some. Yeah, play louder, play louder. You don't know this, but Mark is actually an extraordinary drummer. So that's it. That's it. Everyone check it out. Don't forget, all this can be found online, our website, Facebook, newsletter, as well as your opportunity to donate to keep Althea alive. Having said all that, let's take a moment. Let's get calm and clear, and then let's get into our exploration with Mr. Mark Samuel. All right, so I'm gonna invite you to close your eyes and take a nice deep breath in as if it were the first conscious breath you took today, but hold it a moment. Notice where you might be feeling any hesitation, resistance, tightness. Breathe that out long and fully, really long exhale. And then we're going to do that a couple more times in through the nose. Hold it just a moment as you search your body for tension, tightness, or resistance, and then breathing out to the absolute full extent of your exhale. And feel yourself settling into a place of peace. Sensing the growing stillness and silence within you and around you. And may we remember that in the darkness of our closed eyes, in the silence that holds all things, this is the place where we see and feel things as they truly are, united as one. In this moment, we are as close as we could ever be, and the illusions of distance and time are revealed. From this place, we offer a prayer, each in our own way, but together as one. To the one that is all, our source, our substance, to this pure, magnificent, mysterious existence, we give thanks. We are grateful for another day of life, another day to love and learn and let go. We are grateful for another breath. Dear God, we are grateful for each other and the infinite ways we find ourselves in the world and find you in ourselves. May this be a time of remembering. May we restore our wholeness today, and through this embrace of love and the oneness of all that is, may we radiate the wholeness, the compassion, and the healing that our world is so longing for in this moment. For all these things and the prayers that remain unspoken in our hearts, we lift them together and in harmony, and for the highest good of all, we say, Amen.
Amen.
Well, Mark, we've kind of run out of time, but thank you for joining us.
That was really nice. I love the
yeah.
announcements.
Yeah,
Fabulous.
You were great. You were great. I learned a lot, and maybe we'll see you again. So thank you, everyone. Goodbye. Oh my gosh. So this is so cool. This is so cool. How, first of all, generally, how are you? I mean, how are you personally, and how has the last 6 months of insanity impacted, like, this is a small question, impacted your life? Because you're in California, you're in Los Angeles, your work is based on travel. The whole world is turned upside down since we've talked last. So yeah, how are you? And what's this year been like for you?
It's been an amazing year. First of all, let's just start with, I'm doing great. My health is good. That's, to me, the most important. My family is good. That's second most important, or maybe most important. But it has been a year of transformation, because, you know, I'm a big believer that the universe, God, will present to us the challenges to help us get unstuck when we've been stuck, either in our mindset, our emotions, our assumptions, our loving, whatever all that is. And for me, that came in spades because, as you just talked about, my work has always been about travel, being with groups, working with people directly. And the whole thought of doing team building, interpersonal communication skills, any of that to me was literally in my mindset completely impossible
Right.
to do virtually. And
Right.
now all of a sudden, I had within weeks over $500,000 of business canceled like
Wow.
that.
Wow.
Because we weren't operating that way. No travel, no in-person meetings. And quite honestly, at that point in time, clients didn't even want to think about doing it virtually because they weren't open to it either.
Right.
So my whole world had to pivot in lightning speed to become virtual. And to me, this is the way God works, because we decided to go turn our team system into a virtual program. We decided to do a certification that we had planned to do and do it virtually. And I have to say, it all worked actually better than when we did it in person.
Yeah.
And I never thought, I never even dreamed possible that we could have the intimacy online that you could have in person. And quite honestly, the team has stuck together more than any of my in-person teams. People are making friends over the internet that never happened when we met in person in the same way. The support system has been phenomenal. And I think because of the virtual environment, people are much more accepting rather than judgmental around mistakes, trial and error, trying new things. And it's been a very beautiful experience, and one that for me, I just love when my mindset gets rattled, my belief systems get rattled, because the universe intervenes and said, you don't need to hold on to that judgment or that limiting belief or restriction. We're going to open you up. And that's been the beautiful part.
Right.
I've loved it. Now, I must say to all the viewers who might be listening, I do have an advantage over many because I'm an introvert. So not having to socialize and not having to go into group settings actually is pretty comfortable for me. It's like I get to retreat, unlike my extrovert friends who are just suffering with the not being able to have that physical contact. It's like, yeah, my wife and I are both introverts, and we all just, hang out with each other. So
Brother,
we're doing fine.
I'll tell you, that's so much of your story parallels my experience, but it is funny also how connected we are. I was telling so many people how I was excited to see you and how close we are. And they're like, wow, like you guys sound like brothers. Like, how often do you talk? And I could tell they were thinking like weekly. And I was like, I don't know, once a year we play phone tag and then it doesn't work out. Like, that's how we talk. And the truth is, and actually someone asked me just yesterday, they were like, so like, how is it going doing so much of this work online? Like, it must be terrible. You can't build community that way. And my answer was very much like yours. There's definitely something missing in terms of, the actual energy of being together. We have a beautiful building, seeing faces, seeing smiles, feeling the warmth of the human presence and energy field. There's no question that's not the same. But there's a different value that has arisen, which is like this. I mean, we are having this call in people's living room, and more people are going to see this conversation than if we had it on a Sunday here. And frankly, this may probably feel more intimate, oddly, for a lot of people watching than if they were sitting in the back row of a large room. And,
That's exactly
right? My son, it's funny, my son is the kind of kid who, you remember my son, he's super, super smart, really smart kid, but kind of like his dad, sit at the back of the room, make jokes and get by. Well, that's what happens in the real classroom. He hides, right? And I remember from The Power of Personal Accountability, and people are going to check out that book. one of the ways we stay in the what we call the victim loop is hiding. But I'll tell you, when you're online, if you're picking your nose, the whole team's watching, right? If you're
That's right.
checking your phone, everyone's watching. There's no hiding with some of these virtual meetings. And so in some cases, there's a much greater intimacy.
Yeah, and quite honestly, I can see you better here than I could if we were in a room full of people. Like, because when you're
Right,
talking, and especially if I have you on a speaker view, you're front and present, and
right,
I can see your body language and anything that's going on in your reactions. In
right,
some ways, better than a room if I've got 25 people I'm working with, or 20, or whatever.
right.
So it's very, very powerful from that standpoint. And think about it for just you and I, Jonathan. When we connect, we're usually connecting by phone. This is the first time I've seen you in years.
I know, I
I
know,
mean,
I know.
the once every 2 years that we connect is usually by phone.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I've just not seen you. So
yeah,
this is like, this is delicious for me.
yeah. It's so good. Well, gosh, there's so much I would like to talk to you about, personally, but I really want to highlight, gosh, the work that you do, and I know it sounds, people think like I keep singing your praises, and they're like, okay, you know, we get it. He's your buddy, and I'm like, no, you don't get it. He's also that good. So tell me,
Thank you.
I got a bunch of questions. I'm gonna like get more into interview mode. So your most
Okay.
recent book was B State.
Yes.
And B State, which is behind you, maybe you can hold it up. I don't mind
Yeah.
a little promotion. B State is such a great book. Mark's genius as a consultant is so pure that it translates into every format. So his profession is working with corporations, you know, businesses and teams. But I know from firsthand experience, because I used to work with Mark, on the breaks, everyone comes up and says, well, yeah, okay, this is great for my team, but let's talk about this in my family. Let's talk about
Yeah.
this in my kids. Let's talk about this in the woman I'm dating or the man I'm dating. Let's talk about this in my synagogue and my church. And so could you talk a little bit about what you feel makes B State a special movement, and what does it have to offer beyond the business world?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought it up, because for me, B State is really about breakthrough state. And
Right,
it's about how do we get out of our current paradigm. It's so funny that we're even talking about this,
right,
because even though I talk about it, doesn't mean I always live it. It takes a pandemic to get me off my dime, if you will, and out of my own stuckness, if you will. But it
right.
is all about that. It's how do we get out of our current paradigm, our current limiting beliefs, our restrictions, the way we think of the world, our emotional reactions that are so habitual and have been developed for so long, that instead of trying to improve those, how do I get my consciousness into a new, what we call the B state instead of the A state? A state is our current state. B state is our future state, our breakthrough state. How do we move our consciousness into the future and create from that point our future, rather than
Wow.
creating a future by fixing what's broken today?
Okay,
So
wait.
that's
I'm gonna interrupt.
huge.
I'm gonna interrupt. Okay, this is big. This is very big, because this is literally what this country's going through. And we
Yes,
are seeing two paradigms, right?
yes,
It's not two political parties, and it's not COVID mask or not COVID mask. What we're actually seeing is two paradigms. Now, you said part of the B state wisdom or lesson is to not only understand that a paradigm shift is required. So it's not about doing life the way it is now, but better, but it's actually doing life differently, different
yes,
consciousness, different mindset. But you said, and you have to create the journey from A to B from the B consciousness.
yes.
Now, what the hell does that look like? if someone's never been in the B consciousness?
Well, that's the beautiful part, because just because we've never been there doesn't mean we can't imagine it. Think about us as a kid, as kids. Did you not imagine yourself an astronaut? Did you not imagine yourself a nurse? Did you not imagine yourself a fireman? You know, like, it doesn't matter male or female, it doesn't matter race, it doesn't matter culture. We all have that imagination where we would pretend to be something that we weren't, and we lived it out. And we had no trouble doing that. We played that way. We got other kids to play with us that way. And it was a blast. As adults, we don't think that way. We've literally thrown away our childhoods to become realistic. And in that way, shoot ourselves in the foot, because then we get stuck reliving what doesn't work over and over and over again. Whereas if we would just invoke that very natural sense that we had as kids and said, okay, what do I want my life to look like? What would I be doing differently? How would I act it out? How would people be responding to me, and how would I be responding to them? And play it out in the future. Then all of a sudden, I can start to live that now. It's only behaviors, so I could change it right now.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in. I'm going to keep jumping in on you because I'm so excited about this. I want to get it all, and then you're going to send us a bill, right? Okay,
yes.
so I get that. It's about engaging the imaginal world, the intuitive world, seeing what you long to see, fleshing it out from the highest vision you can muster. But what I know is that a lot of adults no longer trust themselves. And more than that, they've come to feel, so I'm going to be like a real tough interview for you here. I know that a lot of them outside the business world, when you talk about revisioning a life, they've come to sense the stuckness. They've come to sense the limits of the old paradigm. And yet they're not in a place where they can imagine themselves being something they've never seen. They've never had a role model for it. They've never had or at least they don't think they have. So when you think about a life or a culture, more than, let's say, a business, are there ways that people can access that future consciousness before they've really tasted it or integrated it? In other words, it seems there has to be, or there could be, a spiritual step here. That something more than ourselves and our experiences could be a part of creating where we're going. Is that a thing? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. And and let's make sure that when we're talking about imagining the future, we're not just confined to the physical future, because sometimes that's harder to imagine, quite honestly, because again, we've got the evidence in our physical form of everything that's happened up till now. But one of the things that we can also do is imagine what it would feel like in the future. Because in a sense, that doesn't have the same boundaries.
Right.
I can also imagine what's the energy it feels like, and somewhat that's connected to the feelings. For instance, I remember when, this, I was married twice and divorced twice. And I was pretty discouraged. And I talked to somebody about, I'm just not good in relationship. I mean, I can teach it, I can talk about it, but in relationship, I must be flawed. And the coach that I was working with, who was just brilliant for me, said, I don't want you to think in terms of what's the ideal person for you in the way that you have in the past, because that looks like a checkoff list. That looks like, oh, they have these qualities and they do these things and they have these interests, etc., which is in a sense that ideal person or that ideal future, but it's mostly based on physical behaviors and physical attraction and all of those things. She said to me, what I want you to do differently is I want you to bring that person in your consciousness energetically, not physically. And so the way that look is, if you had a bad day and you were coming home, how would you be treated and how would you feel in the company of this person? Like, what would they say to you that would actually make you feel good? Because I know my ex-wives would do things hoping to make me feel good,
Right.
but it made it worse. So
Right.
I got to play out exactly what it would energetically feel like to have that ideal scene come up. And then I discovered something after doing this. And by the way, it wasn't just if things were going wrong. If I had a celebration, how would it be
Right.
reacted? If I was having a birthday, what would it feel like? You know,
Right.
anything of that nature. And what I discovered was I could provide that myself. I didn't need the other person
Right.
because it was energetic. It was
Right.
all inside of me. So I just thought, well, let me be that person for me. And it
Right.
taught me to go, instead of out external, how do I go internal? So when I'm imagining the
Yeah.
future, I'm always aware that it actually starts inwardly first, externally second. And
Right.
quite honestly, it didn't take me very long before I attracted that energetic person. I'm now, you know, married to Kameen, who is absolutely, we've been now together for 11 years
Yeah.
and we still view that we're in our honeymoon.
Yeah.
Like,
It's great. You
it's our
guys are
honeymoon
awesome.
stage. Every day gets better, but it started inwardly, not outwardly. And I think
So
that's the trick in our lives.
yes. So it's sort of like, I'm going to say it back to you just to kind of confirm what I heard. It's almost like saying, instead of the external stuff, what do they, you know, I'm going to even say not even what they do, but just take
Right.
all the physical out. What do I feel like? Like,
When I'm in
who
their
do I feel
presence.
like in
Yes.
myself? And then
Yes.
as I realize that, that's where it becomes so clear. Oh crap, I'm already that. I'm just
Right.
waiting for excuses to feel like that. And that
Well,
if
and
go ahead.
there's one more thing that goes with that, and then it becomes real. Because before, my attributes, it was always what I was hoping I'd become. Like, oh, I want to be with someone who loves working out. Well, the real factor is I don't really love working out. I just want to love working out.
Right. Right.
So instead of playing games with myself based on shoulds, create an imaginary world based on my judgments of what isn't working, I want to get very real to who am I? Who am I really? And energetically, that's the purest state. There's no assessment based on, do I fit in with anybody else? Am I good enough for anybody else? Business wise, relationship wise, etc. It's just, who am I really at my core?
Okay, so I'm going to just like do a little bit of a side jump, because the thing that this starts to move towards is a paradigm shift, because it's saying that in your feeling consciousness, you actually have access to intelligence and wisdom. That's a very different consciousness than what we grew up with, right?
That's true.
But
Yes.
that is actually what you're saying. Now, I don't want any of your business clients to watch this and suddenly realize that you're like some crazy wizard. But I remember, so this might seem scattered, but I remember when we were working together and you were teaching me your accountability model. And I mean, there's just so much I could say about it. But one of the moments that stands out for me among many was when we were talking about, okay, the team has all come together. They've clarified where they're going together as a team. They've started to clarify what it looks like in day-to-day behaviors that are observable and measurable, and what it would even feel like. And then it came down to, why will people do this? How do you make them do this? And you said, well, you don't make them do this. They just created it themselves. They're going to do it. And I was like, no, you misunderstood. How are you going to make them do it now that they made it? And what you talked about was integrity. And the fact that it's actually integrity that drives interlocking accountability. That when people really see themselves in the work, feel themselves in the work, see themselves in each other, feel themselves in each other, there's no more hiding, and accountability arises naturally. And the magical glue, and sure, there's now research to support all this, safety in groups and so on.
Yes.
The magical glue was not material at all. It wasn't reward, it wasn't hierarchy, it wasn't power structures. It was the human impulse to be
Yes.
authentic,
Yeah. And
congruent.
congruent is a great word for it, because even as people are creating it, so what's really funny to me about all of that is that while people are literally creating what that picture of success looks like, they're actually emulating it as they're creating it.
Yeah.
Because the congruence actually begins in our consciousness first, not in our behaviors. So from a consciousness level, they're already there. Now they're applying it to create that picture of success, which describes the things you were talking about. What does it feel like? What are the behaviors, etc.? But as they're doing it already consistent with their inner sense that already exists. And so I don't even have to translate it. I'm actually doing it in the moment and anchoring it. And I always talk about it as embodiment. Instead of achieving a goal, how do we embody our future state?
Yeah.
Because if you achieve a goal, you can unachieve it. But if you embody it, it's yours.
Right. Also, that's the new paradigm. Embodiment.
That's
the felt sense versus achievement.
Yes.
Now, okay. So then this is going to take us to another point. So there's this thing that I talk about quite a bit in my work. I call it the third thing. And I have to say, and I always give you credit, that even though I've built it into something bigger and I've refined it, you really were the person that helped me see it and get it. The idea is that in any couple, well, I'll tell you, the exact example I give to start this off is I say, knew this guy, Mark Samuel. He never calls me, doesn't return my calls.
No.
You know, difficult person to love. But anyway, no. I tell a story about when I was in a relationship, and this was around the time we met. You probably remember this. And I said, I think it's over, And I was sharing with you because I was saying the weird thing is there's nothing really wrong. Like we don't fight, we don't argue. It was actually quite a great relationship. I'm happy to say that to this day. But there's something not happening. And you said, yeah, man, I know what you mean. Like I kind of saw that coming. And I was like, well, what do you mean? No one saw that coming because it was so good. And he said, when you talk about your relationship, it sounds like you're really committed to each other. But I never hear you talk about the relationship. And I was like, what? Isn't a relationship a commitment to each other? And you were like, no, that's a recipe for disaster. There's got to be something that holds the two of you, that's higher than the two of you, that you are both committed to first. And then you can worry about each other getting your needs met. But if you flip it and it starts with, I need this and I need this, you'll never get to a realistic we if you start with me. So the way I talk about it, you got to have the we before the me. And that in everything from a business to a relationship to a community, there's a third thing. It's a higher entity that everyone is actually in service of. That seems to be the place from which what you're talking about is going to work, right? Because if people are coming up with how we're going to do things, they need to be connected to that third thing.
Yes.
Is that correct? Is that an essential ingredient? And how do you start getting people there who may not think they want to get there in a relationship, in a community, or even in this country? So is it an essential ingredient? And how do you start building that third thing when you not only have a history of pain, but maybe you're also in two separate paradigms? Is that even possible?
Well, it's definitely challenging. It is possible. You're absolutely right that that is an essential component. And in my mind, it actually begins by understanding what it feels like when we are separate. Rather than being at the top, what does it feel
Oh,
like when we're separate? Because when we're separate,
huh.
we're in conflict. When we're separate, we have more debates. When we're separate, we speak a different language. When we're separate, we have different priorities. All of the conflict that we experience is based on duality, where we feel ourselves separate from each other. And then it becomes a war of who's better and who's worse, and comparisons and competition and all those things. And it's a lose-lose. Nobody wins. You're either going to compromise if you're in a relationship, which, by the way, is most often a lose-lose,
Right.
or the person with the most power wins and the other person's resentful. So we have to rise our consciousness to a place where we're not in our separateness. We actually rise to a place where we're in our togetherness. And that's the we you're talking about. And once people become aware of what it feels like when we're separate and how awful that feels, then we have to raise our consciousness to something where we both agree. Now, here's the trick to that. There is a trick to it, and that is get more general instead of
Get more
specific.
what? Oh, get more general.
Get more philosophical.
Yeah.
Get right, raise it out of the detailed differences to where's the point of convergence. And that point of convergence might simply be we just want to be in a loving relationship, or we want to be in a caring relationship, or we want to both be successful. Like,
Or we want to
my
be the
success
greatest
doesn't,
country in the world, or
or
whatever.
want to be the greatest country in the world. So it's whatever that general thing is, and then it's working from that down to what would that actually look like? How would we be supporting each other to stay there? How would we be trusting each other to stay there? So it starts to get into building off of that future, what that looks like, rather than staying in, oh, well, here's all the ways we don't do that now or don't measure up now, etc.
Right.
And that's why we've got to get to the future, because in the future, it's open-ended. In the past, always confined by history. So
Okay.
that's it. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in again. Our time's going
Yeah.
so fast. I wanted you to come every week. Okay. But I hear two points of resistance and challenge. So one, to clarify, you're talking about getting general and into the future, and yet in a way that's embodied and present. So that's important for people to hear, that the way that's happening is actually by being more present, not less. But here's a real tough question. I remember that when we worked together and these kinds of conflict resolution dynamics came up, and I remember it was always a very sobering moment. You might have someone in a group, they put their hand up and say, but what about, but what if, and then you'd give them the tool and you'd give them the tool. And then at some point they'd say, and what happens if I do this to the absolute best of my ability, but that other person that I'm trying to draw in, you know, my brother, my mom, my wife, my whatever, my, you know, what they're actually committed to is not that. They don't want to have the conversation. They like the pain because they thrive on the fear that it creates. I mean, to me, obviously, I'm talking about certain figures in our political world right now, but it's also
we
a
don't
pain.
have that in we don't have any of that in our political world now, do we?
No,
Is there any disagreement or?
So the painful thing that or the sobering thing that I remember is sometimes I think I remember you'd say to people, well, okay, that's right. You're going to do what you can. You're going to invite them in. You're going to live to the highest. And at some point, if someone's just committed to being something else or a part of something else, then you know you did your best and you've got some new work to do, something like that. It's no longer about a fruitful dialogue because Could you comment on that kind of an impasse? Because I do, and I don't mind saying this bluntly. I think it needs to be said bluntly. I think that what we're seeing in the political world right now, it mirrors something that goes on in our lives every day, which is that there is a character that is just committed to being oppositional. Very much like a child. My daughter she's 3. I'm certain that, of course, there's a correlate between people who behave like this and their wounding at the age, for sure, because they act like a 3-year-old. She's going to grow through this because she's intelligent, but she'll throw a tantrum just to be contradictory.
No. She's going to grow through it because she's loved, not because she's intelligent.
Thank you. So you get where I'm going with this.
But yes,
you're right. What do we do? What do we do with these relationships in our personal lives? What do we do with these kinds of seemingly impassable relationships in our general lives? And I guess it's the same on all levels. When someone's just committed to not being in the relationship with you, what the hell?
Yes. And let's differentiate 2 different situations, though, and sometimes look the same. And we want to be very careful not to judge them the same. There's those 2 people who do have the same purpose, but when our humanness shows up, we can still break agreements, break commitments, not do the right thing, act opposite to what we said we were going to do. And that's just humanness showing up. And that's why it's so important that even though you gain alignment, that you have recovery plans in place to account for our humanness when our natural mistakes and flaws and frailties as human beings show up, to get ourselves back on track. That's one thing. We don't want to judge those people of you're not committed, you're not doing it right, and go into the blame game. So that puts that aside. That's very different than the person who really doesn't get on board from the beginning. And quite honestly, in an organization, we actually talk about it from the standpoint of it's not a fit. Like, if you don't have the same direction, you may not fit in the same organization. Like, you need to find an organization that fits in alignment with your direction. And sometimes that could be true in a relationship too. You may be in a relationship, but if you're not going in the same direction, you don't, if what loving means to you is not the same as loving to the other person, because to them loving is serving me, and to you loving is we're a partnership, we're a couple, it may not be a good fit. And sometimes we have to choose to leave situations that are toxic or unhealthy for us. It is not about how do I convince that person to change. It may be if we have to be stuck with the person, then it's just simply what's their next level, not how do I get them aligned with me. It's what's their next level of growth, their next level of safety. Because right now, the people that are most polarized are in fear. They're driven by fear. I don't care whether you're on the left or the right. People on the extremes are driven by fear. And so we have to get to a place where we can create safety for people to be who they are, with acceptance for where they are, and then have discussions that will kind of raise the consciousness a step at a time. But if you don't have time to do that because you're in an organization or you're in a relationship and you go, you know what? I'm not committed to a relationship for 50 years to make sure this person in 50 years is going to be finally loving to me. I need to get out of this one to get into a loving relationship now. That's an understandable choice. And that's the challenge of transformation, because it does change the friends we hang out with. It changes the relationships we get closest to. And we have to sometimes make those choices.
So just one last little
it doesn't solve a political issue that we're in now, but the political issue that we're in now has to create the space for people to have dialogue and conversation, which is starting to happen in some realms.
And I think I know the answer to this last part of it. When we used to work together, I remember conversations about these toxic people. Oh, what if the CEO is toxic, but you really need the job? What if, or well, let's extrapolate and say, what if one of your parents is now aging and they've become toxic, but you need to care for them, and you do love them at some basic level. Or what if your president is toxic and you are powerless in some way? Then, well, instead of me answering the question and seeing if I'm right, where do we put our energy in those cases?
Yeah,
Because here's the funny thing: when we used to talk about this, we'd say it. I remember we'd always say, "Well, okay, this is hard stuff, folks, but this is the exception, not the norm." It's now our everyday. It's now our everyday reality, folks. I mean, this is cuckoo bananas. So where do you put your energy when there is a legitimate element of powerlessness?
Yeah, and I really get that. And unfortunately, the only place that we can really put our energy is in our own loving. How do
Our own
we make
loving.
sure to loving? Yeah, we got to get back to our own peace inside.
Yeah.
We have to get to our center, our loving, our acceptance
Right.
that people aren't all the same and we're all on different journeys of growth in consciousness. Because if we don't do that, then what happens is we begin to fuel the polarization. You now have protesters coming guns because they've got militia coming with guns, and now everybody's coming with guns.
Right.
Like, what a
Right.
ridiculous concept. I mean,
Right.
For anyone that thinks everyone, we should have the right to bear arms, that's great. Not in a group setting where everybody's antagonistic towards each other. That's called a little bit dumb, but it's there because of fear. And we have to decide, are we going to be loving and intention based, or are we going to be fear based
And reactive?
Because those two things are different ends of a spectrum, and the only place for inner peace is intention and loving place.
Right.
You don't need to look at the outside world to feel inner peace. You did the centering process to kick off our meeting today.
Yeah.
And in that space is where peace resides. Peace is never going to reside externally. It's now maybe in an extreme place, but not as extreme as in a war country or a civil war situation. But we're always going to be in strife externally. Our peace has to come internally. And the more we stay in that place, the more we put out positive energy and prayer to the rest of the world. That's really where we want to be, is sending our light, our love, our peace to the world is probably the best thing that we could ever do. And the more people that do that, the consciousness that Spirit and God has is so much stronger and greater than anything here. I mean, than anything that's going on.
And you actually just triggered an intuitive insight for me, which is, just to get metaphysical for a moment. Well, psychologically, we know that if we line ourselves with optimism, hope, loving, intention, then that's healing for us.
Yes.
And it's a better place to sit in a difficult situation. It also starts to build this field of energy and consciousness that you're talking about. But the hit that I just got is it also makes us available, or let me say, don't you think? It makes us available so that something, whatever you want to call it, a higher energy of evolution can work through us. In other words, 100,000 people that believe in a loving world that has a place for everyone, but they're spending their time and energy in frustration and judgment, are not available to be utilized by Spirit. Do you think that might be true?
Oh, I absolutely think it's true. And there's a great book called Power versus Force that talks about how Mandela, as an example, Martin Luther King, as an example, people who held that higher consciousness, literally overcame the consciousness of whole countries that were much more into the fight and the anger and the blame and somewhat hatred that existed. But their voices were so loud and their energy was so loud, and they began to build a community that as a community was much louder than the conflicts that took place. And we saw that. I mean, both in the
Yeah.
U.S. and in South Africa in that case.
Well, and interestingly, I was just talking to someone about Gandhi. Now, of course, none of these people were
Another
perfect,
example.
but Gandhi is quite
Right.
an extreme example of someone who, in some ways, this is it's an unnecessary statement, but I'm going to say it anyway, may have demonstrated the power of an individual more than anyone else in real time, in the sense that he just kept pushing the demonstration of nonviolence further and
Yes.
further until he was literally practically hurting himself for them, right?
Yes.
Like, you don't like what I'm saying? I'll say less. You don't like me saying less? I won't even move. You don't like me not moving? I'm not going to eat.
Eat.
Right?
Right.
It's just like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm just breathing now. But he defeated the British. He defeated the British Empire. That's extraordinary.
Extraordinary. That level of commitment. And we talk about how many times was Martin Luther King jailed, as an example.
Right.
Mandela, who was jailed for over a decade, and still came out. Yeah, 2 decades. So, like, it's incredible to the fortitude that those people have, committed to their inner guidance, their consciousness. And let's remember too, because you're pointing this out, it didn't happen overnight. Right. It's not an instant success. See, so often we're still thinking, oh, if I do a good thing, I should get a good reward, and it should be that fast. It just doesn't work that way. It's how does the energy has to build. But the question is, are we staying on the path consistent enough for the energy to build? Or do we put that in forward, and then at the least bit of resistance, we back off and go into doubt, go back into fear, which then interrupts the energy. It's like energy has to build and build and build, and it's going to feed off of consistency rather than off of, I don't know what the opposite of, of the lack of consistency or the, the fragmentation of our energy through doubt, through fear, etc. The energy has to build. And that's where we have to stay truly dedicated and vigilant to our inner peace, and to seeing the world together so that the universe can respond to that. Yeah.
And that's also new paradigm.
Yes.
Right? Because the paradigm we're coming out of is mechanical. I put in the right numbers, I get out the right results. And ironically,
instant gratification.
Instant gratification. Yes. The new paradigm is actually something very old, which is to see things as a process, a journey, a gardening of sorts. Now, I could do this all day, but we typically end at 1:15. Our max time is pretty much coming up in a few minutes. So we have to wrap up. I hate that. But let me ask you to close, doing the work that you do, being as aware as you are, if there were a simple kind of hope, lesson, message that you'd like to share with people who are really facing fear in the context of the uncertainty. And I mean, literally what I get so much is, I'm a spiritual person, I'm doing my work, but what the hell's happening in this country? I'm starting to feel more fear. I'm starting to feel more doubt. Is there anything you want to say, not encouragement, but is there any kind of an insight that you'd like to leave people with? And then we'll wrap up with a little centering.
Yeah, and I learned this literally from my wife, Camille, who was brilliant. We got together at a time when it looked like I was going bankrupt, and all my money was gone, and I was scared to death. Money was a real big thing for me. I always had a fear growing up of being on the streets, and literally I'd have that nightmares about being homeless. There was never any reason for it or cause for it, but this was the closest I got to it because it looked like I was going bankrupt. And I would have bills to pay that I didn't have the money for. And she would always do this with me, and it was just brilliant. She said, right now, take a breath. And she says, are you okay right now? I go, yeah, but in a week, I'm not going to be up. No. Right now. Do you have enough money right now? I go, no, I don't, because I got the, no. Do you have enough money right now to get through our day, to get through the next hour? And I go, well, yeah, that's not what I'm worried about. She go, just breathe and accept that right now you're okay. Right now you're safe. Right now, everything is fine. Right now, you're taken care of by God. And then take another breath. And right now, and anytime you start to feel that worry about the future or mistake you made about the past, stop. You got to stop it. Take a breath and go, are you okay right now? And it took a long time for me to practice that. And over time, that practicing it kept me centered enough that the magic started to come in. The synchronicity started to come in, that the evidence started to prove out, no, I'm okay. And no matter how bad it looks, I'm okay. And I'm being taken care of, and everything works out for me. I'm okay. Just right now. I don't have to think about the future. Right now, everything's okay. No matter what's happened in the past that I thought was disastrous, I'm here now, and I'm breathing, and I'm okay.
Yeah.
And I don't have the banks coming after. Just take it right now. And in that space, new ideas would start to come. That's when the intuition would start to appear that I wasn't even open to before, because I was so busy in my story of negativity and worry and fear.
Right.
That in that moment of, I'll remember she said to me, there was one time I was just freaking out. I had anxiety attack because, my taxes were due, and we owed literally tens of thousands of dollars, if not over $100,000 in taxes. And there was no way for me to pay for it. And I'm like freaking out. She says, well, when are the taxes due? And I said, well, they're due in about 7 months. And she goes, oh, no, we're not. We are not doing this for 7 months. I am not living with you for 7 months of you worrying about taxes. Like 7 months is a long way away. I want you to get right now, go back to your piece, go back to your thing. And then about 2 later, she said, well, whatever happened to that worry? You were so anxious about it. I said, oh, well, once I got into my piece, I got the idea that, intuitive idea to use my book sales, because that's never accounted for in my projections. Use all the book sales to pay for taxes. And we just took all the money in place. So I said, the issue's no longer there. And she almost killed me. She said, you put me through this day. And now all of a sudden it's, oh, no big deal. We've already got it accounted for. We've got it slotted away. It's not bad.
What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
That's so good.
But I'll never forget that advice, because it honestly was the only salvation I had.
Yeah.
Get right present right now.
Are you okay right now? The other thing that strikes me, I wrote this down, is if you can find something clear and true, absolutely true for you, absolutely clear, even if it's tiny, then you create a channel where intuition and energy can flow.
Yes.
But it's not going to start with any of the static of fear or uncertainty. You just start with the little bit that you know, and you go like that, step by step.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you, we're going to close. I always close it. I always do. But I wonder, because I know you're someone who does this kind of stuff. Would you be willing to offer us just a little closing reflection, just a minute to just get centered and say goodbye?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Cool. So before you do, let me thank everybody who's joined, whether you're watching this live or you're watching this later. Don't forget, you can find out what's going on at Althea. There's all kinds of cool stuff coming up. You can check out our website, our Facebook, our newsletter. Your donations are absolutely critical right now because we are not in the building as often as we'd like. So if you're okay right now, you might consider a little something extra because the truth is what we do for everyone who watches, and not everyone can contribute. Not everyone can help us keep the doors open and pay the staff. If you can help in some way, it definitely matters. And it's more than just looking after Althea. It's looking after the community of people that find hope and safety here. On that note, thank you,
I
everyone.
could just add, I
Yeah.
want to add something to that just before you end. And
Yeah.
that was the second thing that my wife had me do when I was facing bankruptcy. She said, I want you to start tithing, even if it's 1%, even if it's 3%. She said, I don't care. You need to start to feel God's love and trust and abundance by bringing in tithing into your life, both tithing in terms of financially, that 1 to 3%, whatever it is that you can, even though you don't think you can afford it, God's taking care of you. You have to trust that God is your partner, not you having to do it alone. And I just want to mention
give to
that
something. Just give to something.
Give
Use
something.
your resources. Yeah, I hear you, brother.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So to me, that was the second thing I did. Those two things: stop, breathe, make sure everything's okay. Know that you're okay because God has made it that way.
Well, and give more.
And give more. Yeah, and give more.
Dang.
Give more of your time, give more financially. Let it be from your abundance that will create new abundance and greater abundance. And every time you give, multiply it by 100 and picture that coming back to you. You don't know how, you don't know the way, but I never went bankrupt. For 2 years, I was week to week, never having to go bankrupt and never knowing where the money was coming from. But as soon as I became purpose driven towards being of service and giving through tithing, the abundance showed up magically in ways I could never have dreamed for 2 years.
It's great. So great. All right. Well, I'm going to find a way to beg you to do more of these with me. And, but for now, why don't we just get grateful and come to our center. Do you want to do it? Are you willing to do it?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Let's do it. All right.
Everyone, please just, get back to centering yourself, get comfortable in your chair or standing up if you're doing that, and just take a big breath. And as Jonathan said earlier, just hold it for a moment. Trust that. Let it out. And this time, when you take your next breath in, breathe in God's light. Breathe in God's love. Let it permeate every part of your body, knowing that God is always breathing you with every breath you take. And let that out in a way that extends your light, your love, God's love and God's light to the people that are sharing the space with you in your home, filling your whole house and the place that you reside. Allow that love to extend out into your community and bring forth a sense of peace, a sense of loving, a sense of community that you envision. And if there's any sources of conflict in your community that exist currently, just send light to it. Allow God to do God's work through you, as you, but through your breath, not through your action, but through your focus, your intention, your prayer. And allow that sense of peace to extend beyond your community out into the world, throughout the US, throughout our neighboring countries, Canada, Mexico, extending throughout the world to Europe and Asia, Latin America, the different poles, North and South Pole, anywhere in the world and everywhere in the world that could use God's light and energy. We are the source. We are the battery that connects to spirit, connects to God, that brings peace and learning and growth and transformation throughout. Let this extend into our day, throughout the rest of this beautiful Sunday, and let us bring peace and love to everyone who we come in contact with this day, especially ourselves. So be it.
So be it. Well, thank you. Thank you, brother. I can't thank you enough. I
Thank
so
you.
enjoyed this. And thank you, everyone who tuned in and staying a little extra long. And I guess we'll talk in a few years.
Or you can invite me on again. I'm always happy to join you on a
Great.
Sunday.
I
This is
love it.
one of my favorite things, talking with my bro.
Yeah.
I love you, man.
Love you
Love
too.
to your family.
Yeah, same. Lots of love to Kameen. Thank God for Kameen.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Take care. Enjoy your day.